My name is Valerie, and I am 54 years old. For 29 years, I raised my son alone. No husband, no help. Just me and Marcus against the world. The day of his wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I wore my best dress. I took a 4-hour bus ride to get there. But when I saw the nameplate on my table, I understood immediately that I was not welcome. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever been humiliated by the very people your own child chose to love? Stay with me. I became a mother at 24 years old. The man who got me pregnant disappeared the moment I told him the news. One day he was there promising me the world. The next day his phone was disconnected, his apartment empty, and I was left standing in a pharmacy parking lot, holding a positive pregnancy test with trembling hands. My parents had passed away when I was young. A car accident took them both when I was 19. I had no siblings, no aunts or uncles who stayed in touch. When Marcus came into my life, I was completely alone in this world, and somehow that made me love him even more fiercely. I worked 3 jobs to keep us alive. Every morning at 4:30, I walked to the bakery downtown, where I mixed dough and decorated cakes until noon. Then I rushed to the grocery store, where I worked as a cashier, until 6 in the evening. After that, I cleaned office buildings until 11 at night. Sometimes I would fall asleep on the bus ride home, and the driver would have to wake me at my stop. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building. The elevator never worked. The heating was unreliable in winter, but it was ours. I gave Marcus the bedroom, and I slept on the sofa in the living room. Every night I would tuck him in, read him a story, and kiss his forehead before going back to fold myself onto that lumpy sofa. There were nights when Marcus got sick and I could not afford to take him to the doctor. I would hold him through his fever, pressing cold cloths to his forehead, praying to whatever force might be listening. I taught myself to identify ear infections, to treat minor cuts, to know when something was serious enough that I had to find a way to pay for medical help, no matter what. I never complained, not once, because every time I looked at my son, I saw the only good thing in my life. He was worth every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every moment of exhaustion. Marcus was my purpose. From the beginning, Marcus was different. He was curious about everything. While other kids played video games, Marcus took apart old radios I found at garage sales, trying to understand how they worked. He asked questions I could not answer, so I got him a library card, and he taught himself. In school, Marcus was always at the top of his class. His teachers would call me at work to tell me how exceptional he was. I remember standing in the bakery storage room, phone pressed to my ear, crying quietly as his 5th grade teacher told me Marcus had tested at a high school level in mathematics. I saved every penny I could to buy him books, educational books, science books, coding manuals. When he was 12, I found an old computer at a thrift store. It cost $50 money I had been saving for a new winter coat. But the look in Marcus's eyes when he saw that computer made my decision easy. I wore my old coat for 3 more years. Marcus taught himself to code on that ancient machine. He would stay up late, his face illuminated by the glow of the monitor, writing programs I could not begin to understand. By 15, he was building websites for local businesses, charging them $20 each. He gave me half of everything he earned. When Marcus was 17, a letter arrived that changed everything. He had been accepted to MIT on a full scholarship. I stood in our tiny kitchen, reading that letter over and over, tears streaming down my face. My son, the boy I had raised alone in a cramped apartment, was going to one of the best universities in the world. That night, Marcus held my hands and made me a promise. He said, "Mom, I am going to be successful, and I am going to take care of you for the rest of your life. You will never have to work 3 jobs again." I believed him. I believed him with every fiber of my being. After graduation, Marcus had a dream. He wanted to start his own technology company. He had ideas that I did not fully understand something about artificial intelligence and business solutions. But I understood the fire in his eyes. I understood what it meant to have a dream. The problem was money. No bank would loan to a 22-year-old with no collateral. No investor would take a meeting with a young man who had nothing but ideas and determination. Marcus applied everywhere and was rejected everywhere. One night he came to visit me in the small house I had finally managed to buy after 20 years of saving. He sat at my kitchen table, head in his hands, and told me he was giving up. The dream was over before it even started. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake thinking about everything Marcus had accomplished, everything he could still accomplish, if only he had a chance. By morning, I had made my decision. I sold my house, the house I had worked 2 decades to buy. I got $120,000. Then I went to the credit union and withdrew my entire retirement savings. I took out a small loan against future earnings. In total, I gathered $180,000. Marcus refused at first. He cried. He said he could not take everything I had. But I told him something I still believe to this day. I said, "This is not charity, Marcus. This is an investment. I am investing in the person I believe in more than anyone else in this world." He took the money. He started his company with his best friend Derek, working out of a garage, sleeping on air mattresses, living on instant noodles. I moved into a small rented apartment and went back to work at the grocery store. I never regretted it for a single moment. 3 years later, Marcus's company was valued at $300 million. My son had done it. He had turned my sacrifice into something extraordinary. He tried to buy me a mansion, tried to give me millions of dollars, but I refused. I told him I was comfortable in my simple life. I did not need luxury. I just needed to see him happy. And when he told me he had found someone he wanted to marry, I thought that happiness had finally arrived. 6 months before the wedding, Marcus called me with excitement in his voice. He told me he had been dating someone seriously, a woman named Brooke Whitfield. Her father, Preston Whitfield, was a major real estate developer. Her mother, Carolyn, came from old money. They lived in a world I had only seen in magazines. Marcus sent me pictures. Brooke was beautiful. Blonde hair, perfectly styled teeth, perfectly white skin, perfectly smooth. She looked like she had never worked a day in her life, and I immediately felt guilty for thinking such an unkind thought about someone I had not even met. When I asked Marcus if he was happy, his voice softened. He said, "Mom, she loves me for who I am, not for my money. Her family has more than I will ever have. She does not need anything from me except my heart." I wanted to believe him. A mother always wants to believe her son has found true love. The first meeting was arranged at a 5-star restaurant in Chicago. Marcus insisted on driving 3 hours to pick me up, but I told him to save his energy for more important things. I took the bus and arrived at the restaurant in my nicest outfit, a navy blue dress I had bought at a department store sale, paired with the pearl earrings my mother had left me. The moment I walked in, I knew I was out of place. The other women wore designer labels I could not pronounce. The men had watches that probably cost more than my annual salary. I spotted Marcus waving from a large round table near the window. The Whitfield family was already seated. Preston was tall and broad with silver hair and the confident posture of a man who had never been told no. Carolyn sat beside him, dripping in diamonds, her eyes scanning me from head to toe as I approached. Brooke smiled, but it did not reach her eyes, and Tiffany, Brooke's younger sister, whispered something to her mother that made them both smirk. Preston stood to shake my hand. His grip was firm but brief, as if he did not want to touch me longer than necessary. He asked what I did for work. When I told him I was the manager at a grocery store, he nodded once and turned his attention back to the menu. Carolyn asked where I lived. When I mentioned my small town in Wisconsin, she made a face like she had smelled something unpleasant. "How quaint," she said, in a tone that made the word sound like an insult. During dinner, Tiffany leaned toward her mother and whispered loud enough for me to hear. She said, "Is this really his mother? She looks like she could be the help." They laughed. Not loudly, not obviously, but enough. Marcus did not hear. He was busy discussing business with Preston. Brooke barely spoke to me. When I tried to ask about her interests, her hobbies, her dreams, she gave one-word answers and then excused herself to take a phone call that lasted 20 minutes. After dinner, I found a moment alone with Marcus. I told him I felt uncomfortable that something seemed off. He apologized and said his future in-laws were just reserved with new people. He promised Brooke was different when they were alone. I wanted to push further, but I saw how much he loved her. His eyes lit up when he looked at her. His voice changed when he said her name. What mother could crush that kind of hope? So I stayed quiet. I smiled and nodded and pretended everything was fine. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window at the dark highway. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, but I told myself I was being paranoid, overprotective, too suspicious. Maybe they just needed time to warm up to me. Maybe I was judging them too harshly because they were wealthy and I was not. I convinced myself to give them a chance. I did not know that chance would cost me more than I could imagine. In the 6 months leading up to the wedding, I was slowly and systematically pushed to the margins. Carolyn and Brooke took control of every decision. The venue would be an exclusive resort in Illinois. The flowers would be imported from Holland. The cake would be made by a celebrity pastry chef who charged more for a single cake than I earned in a month. Every choice was made without consulting me. I tried to be helpful. I called Brooke and offered to help with decorations, to organize the seating chart, to address invitations. She responded with polite rejections every time. She said, "We have already hired a wedding planner who handles everything. But thank you so much for offering." I even offered to contribute money to the wedding. I had some savings, not much, but enough to show that I wanted to be part of this celebration. Marcus gently told me that the Whitfield family insisted on covering all expenses. They wanted everything to be perfect. What I heard was that my money was not good enough. When the invitations were sent out, I received mine 2 weeks after everyone else. It arrived in a plain envelope, no personal note, just the formal card with the date and location. My friend Janet received her invitation before I did, even though she had never met Brooke. I asked Marcus about the seating arrangement. He promised to check with Brooke. A few days later, he called back with awkward news. The head table was reserved for family and important business partners. There was not enough room for me there. I would be seated at table 12, near the back of the venue. Table 12. I had raised Marcus alone for 29 years. I had sold my house and given him everything so he could build his empire. And I was being placed at table 12. I cried that night, but I wiped my tears before morning. I told myself the seating did not matter. What mattered was watching my son marry the woman he loved. A week before the wedding, the Whitfield family hosted a rehearsal dinner at their country club. I found out about it from Janet, who saw photos on social media. I had not been invited. Marcus called to apologize. He said there had been a mix-up with the guest list, that the wedding planner must have forgotten to send my invitation. His voice sounded strained, embarrassed, but also tired. I could tell he did not want to fight with his future wife over something like this. I told him not to worry about it. I said I understood, but that night I sat alone in my apartment and wept until I had no tears left. Janet came over with wine and tissues. She held my hand and told me I deserved better than this. I wanted to believe her, but part of me wondered if maybe I just did not belong in Marcus's new world. 3 days before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Carolyn. Her voice was cold and formal, like she was conducting a business transaction rather than talking to her future son-in-law's mother. She said she wanted to make sure I understood the dress code. "This is a high society wedding," she explained, "not a community potluck. I suggest you purchase something appropriate." She gave me the name of a designer boutique where dresses started at $2,000. I told her I already had a dress. She sighed into the phone, a long, exasperated sound that made me feel 3 inches tall. "Well," she said, "just do your best, I suppose." The night before the wedding, I took my navy blue dress out of the closet. It was not designer. It was not expensive. but it was mine bought with money I had earned through honest work. I held it up to the mirror and tried to imagine myself at the wedding. On the wall behind me hung a photograph of Marcus at age 7. He was missing his 2 front teeth and grinning at the camera, wearing a Halloween costume I had sewn myself. In that picture, he was still just my little boy. He still ran to me after school, still crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, still told me I was the best mum in the whole world. I wondered where that little boy had gone. I wondered if he still existed somewhere inside the successful CEO who was about to marry into one of the wealthiest families in Illinois. I fell asleep that night telling myself that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would watch my son pledge his love to a woman he had chosen. Tomorrow I would be happy for him no matter what. I had no idea what was waiting for me. I woke up at 5 in the morning on the day of the wedding. The bus to Illinois left at 6, and the ride would take 4 hours. I showered, styled my hair the best I could, applied makeup with careful hands, and put on my navy blue dress. When I looked in the mirror, I thought I looked presentable. Not glamorous, but dignified. In my purse, I carried a small wrapped box. Inside was my father's gold pocket watch, the only thing I had left from my parents. It had been passed down through 3 generations of my family. I wanted Marcus to have it to carry a piece of our history with him into his new life. The bus station was cold and empty at that hour. I sat on a plastic bench and waited, my hands clasped in my lap, my heart full of nervous anticipation. When the bus finally arrived, I found a seat by the window and watched the sun rise over the flat Wisconsin landscape. 4 hours later, I arrived at the resort. It was more beautiful than anything I had ever seen in person. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction. A fountain shaped like a mermaid sprayed water into the air. Luxury cars filled the parking lot, Mercedes and BMWs, and a few that I could not even identify. I walked through the entrance with my small handbag, feeling every eye turn toward me. The staff looked at me with barely concealed curiosity, as if wondering how I had wandered in from the wrong side of town. I held my head high and asked for directions to the wedding venue. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. I had arrived early, hoping to find Marcus and give him my gift before the chaos began. But when I asked a staff member where the groom might be, she told me he was in photographs with the bridal party and could not be disturbed. I wandered into the reception hall instead. It was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White roses cascaded from towering centerpieces. A string quartet played soft music in the corner. Everything was perfect, polished, pristine. I found the seating chart near the entrance. Table 12 was indeed near the back, partially obscured by a decorative pillar. I walked toward it, weaving between the elegantly arranged tables. When I reached table 12, I saw the nameplates. Each one was made of polished silver, with names engraved in elegant script. I scanned the names of people I did not know until I found my place setting, but my name was not on the plate. Instead, in that same elegant script, 2 words stared back at me: the charity case. I stood frozen. My hands went numb. I read the words again, certain I had misunderstood, but there was no mistake. Someone had deliberately replaced my name with this phrase. Someone wanted me to sit at this table in front of strangers identified not as Valerie, not as the mother of the groom, but as the charity case. I heard whispers behind me. I turned and saw other guests at nearby tables, glancing in my direction, then looking at my nameplate, then covering their mouths to hide their laughter. One woman nudged her husband and pointed. He shook his head with a smirk. Across the room near the head table, where flowers were being arranged, I spotted Carolyn and Tiffany. They were watching me. Carolyn had a glass of champagne in her hand. Tiffany was trying to suppress a grin. They made no effort to come over, no effort to explain, no effort to fix what was obviously a deliberate act of cruelty. Then I saw Brooke. She glided toward me in her white wedding gown, looking like a porcelain doll. Her expression was one of practiced innocence. She said, "Oh my goodness, someone must have been playing a prank. How embarrassing. Let me get someone to fix that." but her eyes told a different story. There was no embarrassment in them, no remorse, only satisfaction. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw everything I needed to see. This was not an accident. This was not a prank. This was a message. I was not wanted here. I would never be wanted here. Preston walked past without stopping. He glanced at the nameplate, then at me, then continued on as if nothing had happened. Carolyn approached with that champagne still in her hand. She leaned close and said in a low voice, "Let us not make a scene on such an important day. Just sit down and we can sort this out later." Tiffany did not even try to hide her contempt. She whispered to her mother words meant for me to hear. She said, "Well, at least they got the label right." Something shifted inside me. A door that had been slowly closing finally shut. A wall that had been crumbling finally fell. I took out my phone and photographed the nameplate. Then I picked up my purse. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I simply turned and walked out of that beautiful, terrible room. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. I stood on the stone steps of the resort, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle onto my shoulders. I took out my phone and called Marcus. The call went to voicemail. He was still in photographs, still preparing for the most important day of his life, still unaware that his mother had just been publicly humiliated. I typed a message. I attached the photograph of the nameplate. I wrote, "Look at how they treat your mother. I am leaving. I love you always." Then I walked to the front entrance and asked the valet to call me a taxi. On the ride back to the bus station, I did not cry. I had spent too many years crying. Instead, I looked out the window at the passing scenery and felt something I had not expected to feel. Peace. I had made my choice. Now it was time for Marcus to make his. Marcus saw my message between photographs. He told me later that his hands were shaking as he zoomed in on the image. The charity case. Those words burned into his mind like a brand. Derek was standing beside him when it happened. Derek had known me since he and Marcus were broke college students sharing ramen noodles. He had eaten at my kitchen table dozens of times. When Marcus showed him the picture, Derek's face went red with anger. Marcus found Brooke immediately. She was touching up her makeup in the bridal suite surrounded by bridesmaids. He held up his phone and asked her to explain. Brooke's reaction was a masterpiece of deception. She gasped. She covered her mouth. She said she had no idea how such a thing could have happened. Someone at the venue must have made a terrible mistake. But Marcus did not accept the explanation. He demanded to speak with the wedding planner. Within minutes, the planner was standing before them with a tablet in her hands, scrolling through emails. The evidence was undeniable. 2 weeks before the wedding, Brooke had sent an email requesting changes to 3 nameplates. One of them was mine. The original name, Valerie, had been deleted. The replacement text was the charity case. The email came from Brooke's personal account. There was no one else to blame. Marcus turned to his bride, the woman he had been about to pledge his life to, and asked one simple question. He said, "Why did you do this to my mother?" Brooke's facade cracked. She started crying. She said she had been under pressure from her family. She said her parents thought I was not sophisticated enough for their social circle. She said she was just trying to make everyone happy. Marcus asked happy by humiliating the woman who raised me alone. Carolyn swept into the room sensing trouble. She tried to smooth things over with practiced ease. She said it was all just a misunderstanding, that emotions were running high, that surely we could discuss this after the ceremony. But Marcus was not listening anymore. He looked at Carolyn and said something that silenced the room. He said, "Do you know why I have a company worth $300 million? Do you know who my first investor was?" Carolyn stared at him blankly. "My mother," Marcus continued. "She sold her house for me. She emptied her retirement account. She gave me $180,000, everything she had in the world, so I could chase my dream. She slept on a sofa for years so I could have a bed. She worked 3 jobs at the same time so I could have books and food, and a chance at life. The room was utterly silent. Marcus said, "My mother is not a charity case. She is the reason I exist. She is the reason this family wants to do business with me." Derek stepped forward. He addressed Preston directly. He said, "You should know that the deal you have been hoping for, the partnership with our company, went through your final approval on Marcus's desk yesterday. He was going to sign it as a wedding gift to your family. I do not think that is going to happen now." Preston's face went pale. The business deal he had been courting for months, the one that would save his struggling development projects, evaporated in that moment. Carolyn tried to intervene. She reached for Marcus's arm. She said he was being emotional, that he needed to think about the bigger picture. Marcus pulled away. He said, "The bigger picture is that you made my mother feel worthless. You made her feel like she did not belong at her own son's wedding. I am not going to marry into a family that treats her like garbage." Brooke was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. She begged Marcus to reconsider. She promised to apologize. She said she would do anything. Marcus looked at her with something close to pity. He said, "I cannot spend my life with someone who would hurt my mother to please her parents. I thought you were different from them. I was wrong." He walked out of the bridal suite. Behind him, he could hear Carolyn shouting, Tiffany crying, Preston making threats that meant nothing. But he did not look back. He got into his car and drove 4 hours to find me. I was sitting in my small apartment when I heard the knock. It was past 10 at night. I opened the door and found Marcus standing there, still wearing his wedding suit, his eyes red from crying. He said one word, "Mom." Then he fell into my arms and wept like he had not wept since he was a child. I held him for a long time. We stood in my doorway, my son's tears soaking into my shoulder, and I felt my heart break and heal at the same time. Break for the pain he was feeling, heal because he had chosen me. We sat at my kitchen table until dawn. He told me everything that had happened after I left, the confrontation, the emails, the cancelled deal, the wedding that fell apart in spectacular fashion. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I took his hands in mine and told him what I needed him to understand. I said, "You did not fail. You saw the truth, and you acted on it. That takes courage." He said I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you. I said, "You protected me when it mattered. That is enough." In the days that followed, the consequences of that wedding day spread like wildfire through the social circles of the Whitfield family. Guests who had witnessed the empty groom's spot at the altar told their friends. Friends told their colleagues. Within a week, the story was everywhere. The real estate mogul's daughter, who humiliated her future mother-in-law, the tech CEO, who walked away from his own wedding, the nameplate that said, "Charity case." Derek, with Marcus's permission, shared a post on social media telling the story of my sacrifice. He did not name the Whitfield family directly, but anyone who knew the situation understood. The post went viral. Comments poured in from thousands of people, expressing outrage at how I had been treated. Preston tried to salvage the situation. He called Marcus repeatedly, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and grew increasingly desperate. The business deal that had been on Marcus's desk was now officially dead. Without that partnership, Preston's latest development project was in serious trouble. Other investors began pulling back. The Whitfield name, once synonymous with success, became associated with cruelty and arrogance. Carolyn was quietly removed from the board of a charity foundation she had helped establish. The reason given was scheduling conflicts. Everyone knew the real reason. Brooke tried to reach Marcus for weeks. She sent texts, emails, even handwritten letters. She blamed her parents, her upbringing, her insecurity. She said she loved him. She said she would change. Marcus did not respond to any of it. Eventually, Brooke appeared at my door. I opened it to find her standing there without her usual perfect makeup. Her designer clothes wrinkled her eyes, swollen from crying. She said she wanted to apologize. She said she knew what she did was wrong. She said she was sorry. I let her speak without interrupting. When she finished, I responded with words I had been thinking about for a long time. I said, "You are not apologizing because you feel remorse. You are apologizing because you are afraid of losing what Marcus could have given you. Those are two different things." She tried to argue. She tried to explain. I held up my hand. I said, "I forgive you, Brooke, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying anger is too heavy a burden. But forgiveness does not mean I will forget, and it does not mean Marcus should take you back." She left without another word. I never saw her again. Marcus filed papers to annul the marriage since the ceremony had never been legally completed. Derek and the rest of the company supported him fully. There was no public scandal, just a quiet ending to a relationship that should never have begun. A month after the wedding that never was, Marcus showed up at my apartment with a set of keys in his hand. He had bought a house 15 minutes from my place. Not a mansion, just a comfortable home where he could be close to his mother. And for the first time in my life, I accepted his offer to buy me something. A small house with a garden where I could grow flowers and vegetables. A place that was truly mine, given by a son who understood the true meaning of gratitude. I moved in on a sunny spring day. Marcus helped carry boxes. We ate pizza on my new living room floor, surrounded by half-unpacked belongings, laughing about nothing in particular. It was the happiest I had felt in years. The months after the failed wedding became a season of rebuilding. I discovered parts of myself that I had neglected for decades. I joined a gardening class at the community center and found unexpected joy in coaxing life from the soil. I made friends with women my own age who had their own stories of struggle and survival. We met for coffee every Wednesday morning and talked about everything from grandchildren to politics to the best recipes for apple pie. Janet remained my closest friend, but my world expanded beyond her. I learned that I had spent so many years focused on Marcus that I had forgotten to build a life for myself. Now, with my son nearby, but independent, I had the freedom to explore who I was outside of motherhood. I started writing in a journal. At first, it was just random thoughts and memories, but gradually it became something more. A record of my journey as a single mother, the sacrifices, the fears, the small victories that no one else celebrated, the nights I cried alone and the mornings I got up anyway. A small publishing company heard about my story through the viral post Derek had written. They contacted me about writing a book. I declined. My story was mine, not a product to be sold. But I appreciated that strangers had found meaning in my experience. Marcus changed too. He worked just as hard as before, but his priorities shifted. He came to dinner at my house every Sunday. We cooked together, trying recipes from a cookbook I had bought at a garage sale years ago. He told me about his company, his ideas, his hopes for the future. One Sunday, he mentioned that he had met someone new. Her name was Sarah. She was a doctor who volunteered at free clinics on weekends. She came from a middle-class family in Ohio. Her father was a retired teacher. Her mother worked at a library. When Marcus told me about her background, his voice held none of the defensiveness it had carried when he talked about Brooke. He sounded relaxed, happy, himself. I met Sarah on a rainy afternoon in April. She arrived at my door carrying a homemade pie that was slightly lopsided and absolutely perfect. She hugged me like she had known me for years. When she laughed, her whole face joined in. I watched her with Marcus throughout the afternoon. The way she touched his arm when she talked. The way he looked at her when she was not looking back. The easy silence between them that needed no filling. After she left, Marcus asked me what I thought. I told him the truth. I said, "She sees you, Marcus. Not your money, not your company, not your success. Just you." He smiled. It was the same smile he had given me when he was 7 years old, missing 2 front teeth, wearing a homemade Halloween costume. My little boy was still in there. He always had been. I spent many quiet evenings thinking about everything that had happened. The wedding disaster, the nameplate, the moment I chose to walk away instead of accepting humiliation. I realized something important. My value as a person was never determined by how much money I had or what social class I belonged to. Those were external things, labels imposed by others. My true worth came from within, from the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, the integrity I had maintained even when it would have been easier to compromise. The Whitfield family had tried to diminish me by calling me a charity case, but the joke was on them. I had given charity my whole life. I had given my time, my energy, my resources to raise a son who became extraordinary. That was not weakness. That was strength. Resentment is a poison you drink, hoping the other person will suffer. I learned this the hard way over the years. Holding on to anger at Brooke or Carolyn or Preston would only hurt me. So I let it go. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. I hope my story reaches someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is being made to feel small by people with more money or more status or louder voices. Someone who is wondering if they deserve better. You do deserve better. And sometimes claiming what you deserve means walking away from situations that diminish you. It means setting boundaries with people who refuse to see your worth. It means loving yourself enough to say no. A year after the wedding that never happened, spring arrived again. I was in my garden planting tulip bulbs when my phone rang. It was Marcus. He said, "Mom, I want to introduce Sarah to you officially. I want your blessing." I smiled. I told him to bring her for dinner. That evening they sat at my kitchen table. Sarah was glowing. Marcus could not stop looking at her. I served a roast I had spent all day preparing, and we talked and laughed until the candles burned low. Before they left, Sarah hugged me again. She whispered in my ear. She said, "Thank you for raising him. He is the best person I have ever known." I hugged her back and felt tears threatening to spill. Good tears, the kind that come from joy, not sorrow. After they drove away, I stood on my porch looking up at the stars. I thought about the nameplate that had called me a charity case. I thought about how I had walked away from that beautiful, terrible room. And I smiled, because in the end, they were right about one thing. I am a charity case. I have spent my entire life giving charity, giving love, giving sacrifice, giving everything I had to the people who mattered, and I received it back 100-fold, not in money or status or fancy nameplates, but in the only currency that truly matters, love. If you have ever been made to feel worthless by people who think they are better than you, I want you to know that your value does not depend on their opinion. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy of kindness. And you have the power to walk away from anyone who cannot see that. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between accepting disrespect and standing up for yourself? What did you do? Please share your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. If you want to hear more stories about real people overcoming real challenges, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, please share this video with them. Thank you for spending this time with me. Whatever you are going through, I hope you find the strength to know your worth and claim the respect you deserve. Take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away.